This is Pablo
This is Pablo.
Picasso, right?
Uh-huh.
Listen, I've had him since I was 3 years old, and I still sleep with him at night every night. So, but I need to go to the bathroom, so can you just hold him for a second while I go? I'll be right back.
Damn, this thing is nasty. Pablo Picasso, full of drool, and God knows what else. Yikes. I'll leave that guy right there. Be good, Pete.
Are we ripping?
We're live.
We're rolling.
We're rolling.
Welcome to Connected by Water.
Thank you for having me.
We're here today with my good pal, colleague, and amazing angler, Jorge Martinez. What's up, brother?
Good morning, brother. How
Thanks
are you?
for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man.
So you came up from Miami?
Drove up from Miami, had to take the kids to school and
That's
fight
what it's
traffic.
all about, yep.
And that's it, man. Made it up here, and I'm here. Let's do this.
Nice. So, we were talking before this about artists getting together and how a lot of people have like sometimes a problem with that.
Right.
I personally don't, because you got to kind of just, and especially when you do it for a living and
Right.
what's its baggage. You know
Well, I
what
mean, the thing with the art, like we give life to our paintings, but there's also a person behind that, which is like the human factor behind what we do. And a lot of times your work could be judged based on your output, so you got to kind of, play cool with everybody and just, I think there needs to be that commodity amongst all of us that we do the same thing. It's kind of competition, but it's not, because we're appealing to eyeballs. Everybody's got two of them, and, that's kind of, they get to pick who they like, whose work they favor and what, but I don't really think that there's a competition, because we all bring something, the same subject, but completely different to the table.
Yeah.
In the process to get there, we all take a different road on how we end up with what we end up with,
Yeah, I totally agree. I always thought one of the biggest oxymorons was art competition.
Right.
It's like,
How can you
it's
judge
so
it?
subjective.
Right.
I mean, it's not really like you can't totally, there's no way to point it.
Right.
It's like, there's no performance, right? And I mean, obviously you can look at some art and be like, it's not, you know what I
right.
mean? But
Exactly.
I mean, once you become a professional and you get to that level, you're talking about subjective opinion for the most part.
Right. It could be different across the board, and,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, for sure. So, you grew up painting fish
I grew up.
just like me. I mean, you grew up a fisherman, right?
Yeah, I grew up in, my parents took me out of Miami when I was going into 5th grade, and we moved to Punta Gorda, Florida, which was a tiny little town. There was basically nothing there but the outdoors. And I'm so thankful that they did that, because, I mean, growing up in the city, if I would have grown up in Miami, I don't think I would have been as connected to the outdoors as I am. Like, growing up in Punta Gorda was just a different life. Like, I would get on my bike and ride through my neighborhood, which was a house every 3 miles when I first moved in there. It was super unpopulated. And I would ride my bike all over the place, catching bass and all these little ponds. And it was just, with your BB gun and your bass rod, you were catching, bass here and driving across the neighborhood to another lake. And then the obsession just got, we got money, bought a John boat at a garage sale, started exploring a little bit further. And it's always stayed with me. And that's kind of what fuels the art. I'm inspired by what I see out there, the experience, the pursuit. And it's become like a lifestyle. It's not just like a hobby for me. Like, I kind of need that. I need to get away. The city's like hustle and bustle. I'm a father of 2 kids. You're a father too. You know how involving that is. And it's just something I need. It's like my battery charger,
I do know.
And it works hand in hand, because when I get out there and I have an inspiring moment, the next painting is going to flow.
It makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Makes a huge difference.
Right? Every time you go out there, and I try to explain this to people, this year especially, I've been so locked in here. And in a way, it's good because, you want to build the business up and everything like that, and it's good. And you get that out of your head, that part out of your head. But in the same respect, when I do get out on the water, I'm like, man,
I needed this.
Yeah. And then you come back in the studio and you're just completely refreshed, complete mindset, and you're looking at things completely differently. Right. And it's not even just about saying, oh, I wanted to recreate that moment. It's like you may have wanted to recreate that moment, but there's a deeper, soulful experience to it than that. It's not just about X, Y, and Z, or
Right,
one
right.
plus one is two. Yes, that experience, recreate that. It's not about that. It's more about what it does to inside of you.
Right. Yeah, it's the feeling, and that's art is basically a feeling expressed through a visual, you know? And
Yeah.
at the end, it's a visual, but it all starts as a feeling, an emotion, and then becomes an idea, and then it translates into how you do it, how I do it, how all the other artists do it. And that's, I feel like I can't work from photographs. To
Right.
me, for me, like working from a photograph already puts too many fences up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm super critical that if right off the very start, it's not looking like what I'm looking at, I already feel like I'm not doing it right.
Yeah.
So what I do is I jump in, I take 1 million underwater pictures. Like when I catch a fish, I hand off the rod and I jump in with the camera and get, you know, in direct sunlight and like muted light, like on overcast days. And it all plays a difference in the atmosphere underwater and how it reflects off the fish. And I'll basically look at a ton of pictures and then put whatever it is I'm looking at, my laptop, my camera, whatever, I'll put it away and I'll paint based off of what I remember. And it gives me more liberty to kind of do like Bob Ross, you know, a happy little sponge over here
Right.
and whatever, you know, and that's where I have fun because I get to recreate my own version of what I saw. And it's not exactly to the T, and I'm missing a lot of details and I'm missing a lot of color, but it's just what I took away from it. You know?
Yeah, I don't think, missing all that stuff necessarily matters.
No, for that, I just
Yeah, because you can just bring your emotion into it. And,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
that's really comes with, you as an artist and your signature on your own piece. I
Right.
mean,
So that's the fun that I have with what we do is like being able to like recreate, make like a little portal, like a window into a moment in fishing that anybody that fishes could relate to, even though they weren't there at that moment with you. They've kind of seen their own version, but you kind of translate that over in like a broad spectrum where like you haven't been to Flamingo with me and caught a snook, but if I paint that snook in a flamingo setting, you've had your own flamingo experience with a snook that you're like, oh wow. And that connects you to the piece, you know?
for sure.
So
For sure. Absolutely. You described growing up in Punta Gorda like that. And I grew up, a lot of people think I grew up directly in Pompano Beach, but I actually grew up out west here. And when I was a kid, this was completely undeveloped.
right.
So when you were talking about, with the different natural settings, it kind of reminds me of growing up bass fishing out here.
Right.
Because, I grew up at first, catching bass, gar,
Of course.
peacocks, like the whole thing. There actually wasn't as many peacocks
Right.
around then as there is now.
Yeah, it was
but-
more of a largemouth.
So when you caught one back then, it was like
It was a big deal.
big deal.
Right.
Yeah, but now they're like all over the place.
Now it's
but-
a snakehead and all
Yeah,
the
and
other
the snakehead,
invasive
yeah.
stuff.
yeah. So you talk about flamingo, and you fish down there a lot.
Yeah, I did. Before I had my kids, obviously it's hard for me to pull a 14-hour day because Flamingo's fairly far from my house. But I spent a lot of time fishing just about anywhere. Like, after Google Maps came out and all these high-end GPSs that allowed you to go to places that you probably wouldn't dare go in the past because you
Yeah.
turn around and you think you haven't moved, but
You can get lost down there.
Right, you could get super
Easy.
lost. Yeah, I've been fortunate to poke around and spend a lot of time back there and see some really cool things that unless you put in the time, it's like a job almost. Like if you put in the work, you get rewarded. And I feel like the Everglades is like that. There's a lot of stuff that you could see from the side of the road driving across the trail, your alligators, your bird life. But then if you get further away from that human interaction, places that only get visited very seldomly, you get to see like interactions in nature, like birds and fish working together, like the redfish coming down a shoreline, spooking the little minnows and the bird following it, capitalizing
the bull
off,
sharks.
right, and the
it's
bull
like-
sharks.
yeah.
And you get to see the whole harmony of how the ecosystem works in an intact setting, without our, us messing it up somehow, as far as like human presence or development or whatever. There's parts of the Everglades that are just amazing to be there, whether you're catching a fish or not, just to see it and the bird life, the gator life, like gators and sharks in the same place. And it's just like the only place in the world is here,
It really is an incredible place. I try to explain to people like just how beautiful it is on the interior there. And it's, you could take pictures. Clyde obviously does an amazing job, of taking pictures. And it really is like that though.
Right.
And I think that's the beauty of his work is because it's hard to take it with a camera phone or just even like an SLR and just say, yeah, this is what it feels like. But he seems to have been able to really, truly capture like exactly what that feels like.
And his pictures, touching on his stuff, like his pictures capture, because when you're back there, there's not a lot of movement. So it looks like a picture to begin with. It's just a still
Yeah.
environment, you know, light changes, you get wind rip and stuff. But as far as like, it looks like he captures it the way it looks back there. And sometimes it's just magical to look at just in its own setting, whether it's sunrise or sunset, you get different colors, and it's a magical place, definitely. Yeah. And it needs our help, man.
It needs our help. And that's what I was going to kind of get to right now is you and I talked before about, you know, we're both advocates of clean water. I mean, for crying out loud, I named the show Connected by Water.
Of course.
You know what I mean? It's all about the water. I mean, Florida is all about the water.
Right.
I mean, if you had to like put your finger on one thing, even beyond the fish, because without the water, there's no fish.
No fish, right?
So there's been a lot. Obviously, in the past couple of years, I mean, past 3 or 4 years before this, we had all our algae blooms and all the different crazy crap going on. You're very in sync with what's happening. Both of us are involved with the CCA, and, you know, they seem to be, you know, shedding a good light on things.
Right.
I think Governor DeSantis is stepping in and at least trying to do the right thing.
Right.
Give us some your insight on what's happening in your mind and what needs to be done.
I think from a natural standpoint, excluding politics and all that outside stuff, just as far as like the
I don't want to make this a political thing.
That's why
people think that, you know, you can talk about clean water and go beyond politics.
Yeah, because the politics of it is just going to make an idea, like awareness to an idea of where they want stuff to go. But as far as like what needs to happen from a natural standpoint, everybody tends to blame certain people for causing the damage. And there's a lot of people to blame as far as the way the center of the state was set up for agriculture.
Correct.
Right? So that is not necessarily the problem, but that changed the natural intent of the way the place was designed. So water flows from north to south, comes out of the Kissimmee chain, comes down Kissimmee River into Okeechobee, and then it's supposed to filter south naturally through the grass, which is what filters it. But that basically flows through some of the agriculture land. So all that flow of water was directed through arteries, like these canals. Some of the vegetation that's required to filter the grass can't grow in direct flow of current. So by these canals being like straight pipes, when they release water, it doesn't give the water a chance to get pushed through the vegetation that does the natural filtration, which in the end you end up with the clean water, which is the way the Everglades are designed. You know, it all flows
like
through
the natural filter.
Right, it's a filter. It flows through the grass and then it ends up in Florida Bay. As all for all these years that this water's been rerouted and been redirected across the state for business purposes, for safety purposes, because you can't flood certain zones because now there's people living in these zones.
I was going to say sprawl is another reason. Like people,
right, like
more houses, more developments, more people.
So you can't just send a bunch of water and flood out half of an Indian reservation or flood out like the people living on the outskirts of the stuff. So I think right now we have cycles, right? We have weather patterns. Like right now we're on a hot cycle. You know, we have been for a while. We have the water temps are warmer. There's cycles that happen where I think with all this water that they want to send south, all this area has been dry or had minimal water. So what happens is all the decaying matter and all the stuff, all that sediment becomes like a scab, like a crack.
Right.
It just gets like dried and compact. And I think in some of these places that haven't had water flow, if now we redirect a bunch of water through there, it's going to do a lot more harm before it starts to do good. Because like in any part of the Everglades, anybody that fishes back there a lot and spends a lot of time back there, if we have a whole bunch of rain in a short amount of time, the very next day, if you get back in some of those back bays, you're going to have fish kills. Because all that decaying leaf matter from the mangroves that's sitting up high above the water line, when you have all that rain, flush that out in a giant, you know, in a big amount, it doesn't give the water a chance to dilute it, where it dilutes it enough for like bigger fish to not feel the effects, but you have die off of a bunch of little minnows and like your forage fish start to die. And it happens all the time, naturally.
So the food for the apex predators.
Right, exactly. So it happens along Miami Trail. It happens in the back bays of Chokoloskee. It happens in the back bays of Whitewater, where if you have a massive flow of water in a short amount of time, you have fish kills. And my fear with the whole thing of sending all that water south is that it's going to release all those toxins on a bigger level, and eventually it's going to affect Florida Bay. Florida Bay used to be a complete freshwater environment up against the coastline. Like if you look at pictures of Florida Bay, like the whole shoreline of Flamingo used to be sawgrass because of the natural flow of water would push the saltwater intrusion further away. So you wouldn't start to get turtle grass until you got to a certain distance away from that flow, from that direct vein of water. As to where now, or it's been happening for years now, with us redirecting that, I'm saying us, but as people, Army Corps of Engineer,
right.
you know, whatever, the saltwater intrusion has come a lot further. And I only know this, I wasn't alive, but I've gotten the opportunity to talk to some of these legendary guys that are, you know, key personalities in this sport that were doing this, you know, way before I was born, before, you know, and
it's exactly it. It's a problem that's been happening for a long time.
Right, and it's a problem that's been happening, and the saltwater intrusion now, there's mangroves in a lot of places where there didn't used to be, and that they require salinity to grow. At the same time, they become shoreline barriers, so they protect us from storm surges, hurricanes, and whatnot. So it's kind of a necessity. I don't want to say that it should be left alone, but I think that it has to be done properly and in steps to send that water south. We can't just say send the water south.
Yeah, I don't think it's a 1-year solution.
Right, and it's
a long-term solution.
And there's a lot of factors because like at the top of this whole water source, you have a business that basically has tons of property that's all manicured. It's all manicured grass with pesticides, with chemicals, and all those properties have tons of little veins of water that eventually flow into the Kissimmee chain. And then it picks up the agriculture and the cattle runoff. So by the time all that water gets to Okeechobee, it's already disgusting.
Right.
And then the lake is 30 miles by 30 miles, but it's got an average, you know, a deep depth in Okeechobee is like 6 feet. Most places are 3, 4. Well, in our summer, which is basically, you know, March through October.
Yeah.
You know, the water temps skyrocket and all that stuff just sits there and festers because in the lake, you don't really have current. It's all wind driven. You know, so if we have a light east wind for a lot of days, that water just kind of, and that's why when they fly over the lake, you get those blobs that are kind of out in the middle and they're just kind of, you see those blue-green blobs and all that is eventually what flows out. And I'm not saying that's the direct cause of the red tide and all the algae problems, but
some of it's natural.
Some of it's natural, but the fact that we're giving it food to blow up to giant scales.
Yeah, we're not helping it.
We're helping it get worse instead of trying to stop it. And I really don't know the answer on how to stop it because it's been like a 100-year process, you know, with the water being reverted and whatnot. It's a serious issue, but on a good note, after Irma, you know, Florida Bay got a big storm surge. And I think hurricanes make fish. No, like, I don't know if that makes sense because there's a lot of sediment that basically, I don't know how to explain it. Like, so if you got sediment and that plant life is supposed to get a certain amount of direct sunlight, with this layer of sediment, it's only getting a percentage of it. So it's not growing and flourishing and getting as thick and as healthy as it should be. So it doesn't provide the housing for all the little stuff that lives in it. So it kind of rearranges the habitat. But now flamingo is fishing like how it was fishing when I first experienced flamingo, which was in 96, 97, 98, which is when I really first started fishing it. Like, if you're going to go to the Keys right now and book a guide, there's no better time to go fish the Everglades I mean, the snook fishing is amazing. You know, the trout, the tarpon, the baby tarpon fishing, now that we have high water in the glades, there's tons of baby tarpon around, and there's still areas that are in shambles. You know, there's still areas that the grass is dead or not looking very healthy. But Mother Nature is resilient, man.
Yeah, it'll grow back.
You know, you plug her over here and she's coming out over here, you know? So I just think we're in a cycle that's moving towards a better. We just got to work on helping it get better as to feeding the problem to make it worse.
Right. So you're telling me that you don't have an opinion on the matter?
No, I mean,
no, man, that's good stuff. I love fishing down there. I mean, that's one of my favorite places to go fish. I mean, I went, one time I went with Adrian and Regina.
Right.
And two of the best people to go down there with.
Yep.
I mean, and we just had a blast and you just get lost.
Yeah, it's cool. It brings like an adventure. Like you could have that little kid like, oh, what's around the next corner? And you know, when the fishing's bad and the water quality's bad, like what's around the next corner? Another aquatic desert. You know, you can pull for 20 miles and see 2 fish. Whereas right now, there's so many little sharks around. There's so many like smaller fish in the brood stock. Like you're catching a ton of little redfish, you know, 15 to 19 inches. There's tons of snook. The mullet are everywhere. You know, like there's so much life. Like I went I've probably gone like 4 times in the last couple months, and every time we've gone, it's been like magical. You know, it's been, I mean, triple tail floating all over the place. It's just like, I think like what it should be, you know?
So you want to end the podcast and just go fishing?
Let's do it. I'm always down to go fishing.
Like, dude, you're getting me all jacked up.
So, I mean, that's like one of my things is to get people jacked up on fishing, but not just to go out and catch a fish, because all this stuff and all these problems that we've known about in the natural setting has always been like the whistleblowers have always been the sportsmen. You know, like when there's problems in like the deforestation of areas and loss of habitat, like the deer hunters, the turkey hunters, you know, the elk hunters, they're the ones that bring these problems to light. Right. As to where what's happening in Florida now, the charter business and the fishing industry has grown and spiked in such a giant, you know, in such big numbers that now you have representatives that are for the environment all up and down the coast, you know, blowing this whistle like, hey, we got a problem. Hey, we need to change our bag limits. Hey, we got to stop, you know, the possession of this fish during these times, because that's like their key spawning months. And it's making a difference, you know, because now it used to be something that only like us as fishermen or hunters would know, like, oh yeah, this place is getting messed up. But now it's becoming a broader problem because it's getting awareness in a bigger scale, because these guys are now talking to friends and neighbors, and then now average people that don't fish but maybe live on the water and they paid all this money for their property, they walk outside and it looks like pea soup right under their dock, and they're not happy. So now it's getting to where stuff's happening, the ball's rolling. You have all these great organizations, you know, raising awareness, doing everything they can to help, like Captains for Clean Water. Those guys have taken on the battle head on, have basically put their life aside. Right. Chris Whitman and Daniel, they've gotten with all the key captains in all the areas, and they're getting realistic, positive feedbacks from people experiencing it versus like a scientist that's only there for a few days doing like minimal research. You know what I mean? These are guys that are living this every day. They've seen the changes. They've been on the water for the last 10 years, 200 days a year. So they've seen the ups, the downs, the decline. And
it's definitely the people out there. I mean, you know, if people want to ever knock fishing or hunting, like the whole PETA style thing, it's like, come on.
Right.
Like without the people that are out there that are truly practicing conservation and, you know, utilizing the land and the water the way it's supposed to be utilized and everything, like there wouldn't be that anymore. Because I think the people, like we talked about sprawl earlier, I think the people that are moving in the new neighborhoods that are creeping in on the Everglades and things like that are more to blame for being against conservation than any of it, if you're living there obliviously.
Right. And then I think it's also it's good because it's created a mindset that, like, back in the day, like fishing was like a way to put food on the table. Right. And then like develop this macho thing. Like I can go out and kill my limit every day. Like that was like the objective. And now it's kind of, with all the ongoings and all the awareness about the environment and places just, you know, going down, it's part of like the mindset. Like if I'm going to be this like high, you know, if I want to fish at this level, it's the ability, you know, the pursuit, and then it all comes tied into this big mindset of conservation. You know, you got to catch and release these fish. Don't hold them out of the water for the pictures, you know, handle them. Don't put your fingers in their gill.
Like educate yourself about like which tarpon you can take out of the water.
Don't lip a giant fish and cock his lip out, because you're going to break his jaw and you're going to do more damage than not. So I think we're moving in the right direction as far as like, as the masses go. Like everybody involved now wants to help versus having that, whatever. There's a million fish out there.
Well, I mean, social media, I mean, we have to bring up social media in this conversation, because it's definitely been a huge influence in all the things that we're talking about. Right. Like both the clean water thing, because that really brought to light up a problem, because if it wasn't for social media, I don't think people would really understand the true scope of the problem.
Exactly.
Right? So that's a good benefit to the social media aspect of it. Social media has also made fishing become a strong trend for better or for worse. Right. Some might help us in the industry, and,
of course,
you know, but as far as the actual element of the reality of it, it may not be helping, you know, as much. So there's got to be there's this tough balance to it all. I don't know how long it's going to be a trend for, but definitely seems to be like the cool thing to do now.
Right. And then the awareness, it kind of helps with the balance, because as an individual, you got to do your part. And like what I say by doing your part is like when you go to these places, like the only thing you should leave is like the bubble trail on your motor. No prints at all. No litter in the mangroves. Like, you know, obviously nobody's out there littering. And that's, and I want to say, I mean, that's a good thing. Like you go to Biscayne Bay and it's full of garbage, you know, because there's a small percentage of like conscious fishermen and there's a giant percentage of pleasure boaters.
The sandbar guys.
The sandbar guys that just look as the ocean as like a wet playground.
Right.
And they don't care. And, you know, and that's a hard mindset to change because you can't tell a full grown man like, hey man, you can't run over that turtle grass because you're going to get, you know, like a stupid response like, oh, who are you to you on the water? So it's, you know, it's kind of a mindset, man. Like if you participate, you got to be aware of what you're doing, what basically what little world you're entering. And you got to figure out how to coexist without ruining it. If anything, you want to help it, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, that the fishing, I think the fishing has grown to an area, like it's already at a level where I think some of the playing fields just can't handle it. You know, I had my high school friend over last week from Punta Gorda, and he came over to fish, and he's super involved with Captains for Clean Water. He has that whole preach movement against the mining, the phosphate mining and everything up in DeSoto County and everything. And, he was telling me there's like 700 registered charter captains between Lee and Charlotte County. And you're talking about Charlotte Harbor.
That's not a big area at all.
Right. And you're talking about Charlotte Harbor and Pine Island Sound. I mean,
wow.
I mean, that's a giant amount of human presence. And you just got to hope that they're all doing their part because, I mean, those kind of numbers and that interaction makes a difference. You know?
And you talk about with the conservation thing, you know, I find that most of the conservation that's done in our industry is effective. Right. Like a direct, you know, positive A plus B result. Right. Whereas not to be confused with environmentalism. Right. Which is not necessarily cause and effect result. It's more whining and complaining and give us more money. Right. Exactly. This is more like, okay, listen, we have targeted the issue. We've targeted the problem. Right. We know how to effectively make it better. Right. And this is what we're going to do. Key organizations across the state are a big reason for that. Responsible charter captains are a big reason for that. Right. And just responsible and experienced anglers and hunters are even bigger reason for that. So I think it's important to support these educational movements, these educational resources, and listen to the right people who are out there. I think I'm just basically supporting your point.
Well, I mean, like the captains. The captains have a giant responsibility, and all of them seem to fill those shoes because a lot of these captains, they get these guys that come to them because they want to go out fishing. And then once you take somebody out fishing and you have a great day on the boat and you have that great interaction where you're out there just being two dudes on a boat and there's good chemistry on the boat, now you've already broken that client, customer kind of relationship down. Now these people become friends, and
we talk about it all the time on the show.
Right. So now you got these anglers and guides like that have these friendships, and the anglers look at the guides as their main source of information based on that because they're hiring them to take them out fishing. So when the guide talks, these guys listen, and a lot of these guides are talking conservation and, you know, the water quality. So every one of these people that steps on one of these guides' boats walks away as a representative towards the right direction. You know what I mean?
They're like fishing gurus.
Right, because they're talking to their guide's telling them firsthand accounts, and then they're going back to their circle of fishing friends, and they're like, oh yeah, man, you know, I was just with this guy down in the Keys, and he was telling me this, and this, and this, and this, and then all that stuff kind of sticks, you know, where every one of those people in that group walks away with a little piece of it, and they spread that, and it keeps spreading, so the idea goes from the boat at the epicenter of where it's happening back to these places, because not a lot of these clients are locals. You know, they're flying in from out of areas to fish. So now they're going back and they're spreading the message, and it kind of spreads it in a good way, you know? So a lot of these guides are super...
You're creating a culture.
You're creating a culture, but what I'm saying is a lot of these captains are like running the show because these guys really start to look up to these guys as far as like
1,000%.
Everything that's going on. They know that these guys are in tune with the habitat, with the fishing, with everything. So what they say isn't fluff. They know that what these guys are telling them is from a firsthand account, you know? So I think that's super positive because as the sport grows, you have more of that client customer interact. And I'm not saying everybody out there is being like a pro positive. That's
not possible.
Right, it's not possible.
There's still a human nature element.
Right, it's just realistic. There's a lot of people that get into it for the wrong reasons. They get into it because it's, quick, easy money these days. Like you go on social media, you see some of these captains are all big fancy boats, big giant trucks. So who doesn't want that,
Yeah.
So, but I think with the awareness and the social media platform, it's helping spread the message in a bigger way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely had more of a positive effect than a negative effect.
I mean, it has negative effects too. Like it puts a lot of people in places where those fish don't deserve to be interacted with all the time.
But that's getting exposed though.
But now it's getting exposed. So now like for example, like our wintertime tarpon fishing used to be like only the hardcore guys that were involved knew that in between cold fronts, these fish would show up. And now it's become like, everybody looks for that now. So when these fish show up, there's a wall of boats ready to hammer them.
The worm hatch and all that.
And they hammer them over and over and over. And same, like the worm hatch. The worm hatch used to be like, the old timers kind of could predict it based on the moon phase, and now it's like a televised event. There's people hanging off the bridges with cameras, drones flying around. It's crazy, dude.
News reporting it.
Right, exactly.
We're here for the worm hatch.
Right, CNN, exactly. So it has its goods and its bads, man.
Yeah. Creating the culture of positivity, I guess you can liken it to anything else of creating a culture of positivity. And you can create a culture of, good news versus bad news / fake news or whatever.
Right.
And you can create that culture to, manifest itself into whatever it needs to be.
Right.
You can create a negative culture for chaos and personal gain.
Right.
And that's horrible. You can create a positive culture, an educational culture, for the betterment of everything that we're talking about.
Right.
And I really think it's the responsibility for every Floridian, not just the captains, but they're the leaders in the forefront of this. But that's why Captains for Clean Water is such a really great idea.
Right.
Because it really sheds a light, I think, on that theory. But it's really the responsibility of every Floridian because, I mean, not to say we're all connected by water, but it's true because this state that's part of the reason of the name of the show because it's all connected by water.
Exactly.
So we're all in it together. Because if you look at Florida, I talk about this all the time, where you look at the United States of America and you look at Florida, and of all the places that were pioneered and frontiered, and how we went out west and everything like that, Florida was like the last to be discovered and developed.
Right.
It's because it was not really made for man.
Right. It was harsh and penetrable.
And it was, you can't build on sand and like the whole thing in the ground, you can't dig. And, it's not like Manhattan where it's the whole thing is made of granite.
Right.
So if you look at Florida, we're the kind of last. Right. And that's why everything around here is like, oh, that was built in the 50s or that was built and that's old for us.
Right.
You go to another state, you're like, oh, that was built in the 1800s.
Right.
Like, this state has never seen the 1800s.
Exactly.
There's like Spanish forts. That's about it.
Right.
But so with that in mind, I think everyone's got a real responsibility and a good opportunity to be like, okay, time out for a second, because let's look at Florida for what it is. You can't just build on every damn place there is, and you can't just landfill all this place like Dubai.
Right.
Because it's not going to work.
No.
Because we're eventually all going to start drying out.
Right.
If this place dries out, that is not bueno.
No. I mean, you could already see it as far as like you're in Miami and it's 110 degrees at night.
Yeah.
And you drive past Chrome Avenue and you get out in the glades, there's less cement, more trees, and the temperature drops 5-10 degrees. Like it's insane. Like there's times I leave my house and it's 69, 70 degrees.
It's like a pizza stone.
Right. And by the time I get to Chokoloskee, it's 61, 55, driving through Big Cypress. It's like a giant, and it's because of all the cement, like I think they're definitely, it's impossible because of the amount of money, but like in some places in the Keys, there's moratoriums on building. Like you can't build past certain places. You can't add.
So aren't they going to do that for like, they're going to full on do that, I think, to like starting in 2020 or 2021, where they're not going to build at all now, right?
I mean, I heard there was that big mall.
That law.
They were saying about this big mall out in the Everglades, and I don't know. I haven't heard anything about it.
That place is the devil.
Yeah,
that got put on pause for a little while.
Thank God. When I heard about the plans for that one, I'm like, oh God, please no.
But I feel like they're going to build houses out there now.
I mean,
damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I mean, and like if you look at the Everglades that butts up against the Tri-County, you know, Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade County, man, it's still, to some people, oh, it's just a bunch of woods. I can go throw my garbage out there.
Yeah.
Like you see these general contractors and you know it's like somebody working on houses or something because you'll see a pallet out there with like tiles and pieces of drywall where people just put it on the back of their truck. You know, they tie the pallet to a tree, they drive off, boom, it sits there and it's there forever, you know?
Yeah.
And it's sad, man. It's sad because you go anywhere outside of here and you go to national parks, man, and it's like almost like if somebody's combing the ground. Mm-hmm. Like no cigarette butts, no plastic cups, no bags of chips. I mean, yeah, you'll see it here and there, but not at the level.
Not rampant.
Right, not rampant like you see it here, you know? It's sad, but it's a mindset and it's hard to get people to understand that, you know?
I mean, as artists, we have a little bit of responsibility to this too.
Right.
You know, or a lot of responsibility to it, but
in a sense, we're kind of historically illustrating the conservation at the moment, you know? Because how we are painting something now in the habitat in its current state, probably not going to be the same as a marine artist in 2025. Or if you look at our, you know, the guys that started, you know, like Russ Smiley was painting in the 60s.
Right.
You know, like Stanley Meltzoff and stuff like that. So
lots of bait all over the place.
Right, baits everywhere. You know, it's super like, you know, Noah's Ark, like two of everything in a scene, you know, and so I think we have a responsibility, but we're also illustrating the beauty of this. This is what draws us to it. And some people just don't have the access to it like that. We're fortunate, man. We live in our subject.
Yeah.
Like you paint a lot of offshore stuff. You can hop in a boat out here and see sailfish. You know, you can see them surfing in the wind, you know, on the north winds. You can see the bait balls. You can see it all. Same thing with me with my inshore stuff. You know, I got Biscayne Bay, the Keys, the Everglades. Some people don't get to see that. So through our paintings, you know, it kind of draws them, you know, and it kind of, we're kind of highlighting the beauty of it through our work, you know? Because in the end, you want to make a pretty picture, you know?
Yeah, you want to make a pretty picture. You also, I think you want to evoke, how it feels to you.
Right.
And not just, you know, what it looks like, you know, from like you said, you don't want to like put fences up with the photographs.
Right, exactly.
I completely agree with that. We all got our own style we want to implement on it to kind of display that emotion. But,
right.
I mean, you know, the responsibility, I think, of not only try to kind of phrase what I'm thinking in my head. There's a movement, I think, that's happened over like the past decade, let's say, maybe even longer, but to where there's a much more diverse offering of marine and fish art than there has been in the past. I mean, everyone always looks to like Russ and Stanley and stuff like that. Awesome guys.
Right.
Amazing artists.
Right.
Then you got like your Don Ray and everything like that, who just is like
alien,
my idol.
Right.
You know what I mean?
He's an alien.
And I say this to Don like to his face, and it's like I love you.
Right.
You know, and he's just a great guy.
Super
too.
Great
on
guy.
Top of it,
you know, I've gotten the opportunity to talk art, and he's just always positive, like good feedback. You know, he's
for sure. But you know, it's kind of like you know, it's exciting to see. I think the amount and the variety of different styles and different art, and just like the celebration of that culture.
Right.
The celebration of our state, the celebration of our water. You know, but you know, you and I have been doing it for a while now, and it's kind of very like this. I get this warm and fuzzy feeling like hanging out with you and like talking about this, because it's like, you know, I don't know why some artists have a problem like relating with other artists.
Right.
You know, but it's an issue.
Right.
You know, for some artists. And I get it, because every artist is kind of like wants to be as good as you can.
Right.
You want to create the work and be on the level.
Right. You're putting out a piece of yourself, so there's obviously a piece of ego that goes with it. It's normal. You know?
So, yeah, but, you know, I don't think you should really make that like an attack on another artist.
Right, exactly.
I mean, what's the point of that?
Right. It just...
Yeah.
Like I get calls, I get private messages all the time on Instagram. Hey, what markers do you use for this? Or, hey... And I don't hold back for what?
For sure.
I know that there's no chance that I'm going to give that person my resources and they're going to recreate what I'm doing. There's no chance. Right. They're going to do it better. They're going to do it different, but they're not going to do it the same. And that's how I'm always going to be George. You're always going to be Dennis, because there's people that are going to do it similar. They might do it better. They might do it less, you know, but they're not going to do it like how you do it. Yeah. So I don't really hold back on these, especially if it's a young person, because the fishing game,
especially if it's a young person.
right? And the fishing game, when I was growing into it, you know, you still had a lot of these old school guys, and they're kind of honorary, and they've been around. They're salty, and it wasn't like a kid sport back in the day.
Right.
There was a lot of older people. Like I would go to these art functions, and everybody was 65, and I was 18. You know?
Yeah, I hated that.
So,
when you go like these art guilds and like the things like that, it's like a bunch of retired people, and
right,
you're like, I don't
exactly.
belong here.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I was always like fish out of water, and then I got the opportunity to work at a fly shop in Miami, and I was at the foreground of like the scene in Miami, and the fly shop in Miami.
The fly shop, yeah.
And you know, I would have these kids that would come in, and there's no reason to, you know, be standoffish because they're asking you a question that's super entry level. So I would always do the opposite. I would give them the best experience that they had coming into that shop. I would open the material, be like, look, you could use it like this. You could twist it around and do this with it. If you're not comfortable with that, this does it. It already comes rigged for that. And it wasn't like they were walking out with a product. They were walking out with the product and a bunch of direction.
Yeah. That
kind of simplified and knocked down that barrier between somebody that was doing it for a super long time and somebody that's new to the game. You know, and I always try to get people's attention, because once you got their attention, you could tell them exactly what you want them to hear. You know what I mean? And that's when I would start with the conservation. Like, listen, man, if you find a bunch of fish, don't go there and try to catch every single one of them. You know, go catch one or two, pay attention to all the signs, because there's signs everywhere, you know, water depth, quality, you know, depth, temperature, whether there's a direct flow of current, and go try to match that somewhere else. And now your one spot's going to become two, and two become four, where you don't have to go and beat those same fish up day in and day out, because fish act the way they do now because we've trained them. That's why you throw at a redfish and flamingo and you got to be good to get one. And then you go to Louisiana and you throw it anywhere in sight of their face and they're going to eat it. You know, it could hit them in the head. It could throw, and that's because the marsh is huge and there's not a lot of interaction. You want to talk about another resilient.
No pressure.
You want to talk about another resilient habitat. I mean, you got this freak of nature where you got the Mississippi River dumping all this nutrient, all this food into this marsh that the oil industry has completely industrialized it. Like, you go everywhere over there, there's a barge, an oil head, a pipe, a well, a rig, and man, the fishing over there, the fish life, the shrimp, I mean, there's just so much stuff over there. And just now they're starting to get the whole conservation over there, you know, because over there you can kill 100 trout. I mean, you see these bay boats coming in, and their slogan is home of the wheelbarrow. And it's got a guy with a wheelbarrow full of trout and redfish. Well, no matter how, you know, fertile that place is, eventually, as that industry is growing the way it is, where there maybe used to only be 3 guides out of this marina, now there's 20, and then there's a marina down the street with another 20 and another 20, you start doing that 200 days a year, you're extracting a lot of living things out of that little ecosystem, you know? Because, you know, like, no matter how big a place is, like the Everglades are big, you know, Flamingo's big, but the biomass isn't spread equally over the whole thing. You know, these fish gravitate, like, you're in your house, you got your favorite chair that you watch football on. So if somebody so somebody comes into your house in your downtime, they know where to find you, right? Well, these fish are the same way. Like, they don't always, like, they have their places where they want to be, whether it's based on water temperature, food source, current. Some places are like staging areas where they hold before they move off to another feeding zone, and some places are feeding zones. That fish is there to do one thing, and that's eat. That's he's ensuring his tomorrow by going through there and doing what he's programmed to do. And that's why I always tell these people that are getting into fishing, like, dude, if you find the gem, don't beat it. You know, you find an area that's holding a ton of fish, don't go in there and just punish it and then take your friend to punish it, because all you're doing is you're going to take that little biomass and you're going to spread it out, and it's going to make it harder for you to go find it again.
Right.
And now that's happening at a giant space. So that's why, like, the game has changed, and recreational fishing now, like a recreational fisherman from now versus a recreational fisherman from back then with less human interaction, it's night and day. You know what I mean? Like, the amount of knowledge that you have to know these days to put a day together. Mind you, we got GPSs and bottom machines and fish finders and fish imaging and all that. But
you know, it's kind of like if you got a whole bin full of hurricane food and, you're prepping.
Right.
And then you're all boarded up and you're bored and you're just like, well, I'm going to start eating all this hurricane food. And then the hurricane comes and you're out of power and you have no water. And you're like, damn, I wish I had my hurricane food.
Exactly.
It's the same theory.
And that's what happens to some of these spots, you know? So that's the mindset that I always try to tell these young guys getting into the sport. Like, look, man, you're not going to be the guy that walks into a room and people drop to their feet by posting 1,000 pictures on social media. That's not going to get you anywhere, bro. You know what I mean? Everybody's got a fancy camera these days. Everybody goes out and catches fish. Like, you just got to go do your thing and like lead your movement with an idea and like and spreading that idea to keep it, you know, try to keep it intact as much as possible by not leaving a print. And that's basically it. Like, you can't leave a thumbprint, you know?
I think there's a lot of similarities to what we do professionally as being fish painters, just marine artists or whatever you want to call it. Still haven't figured out a name for it. And fishing.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of parallels to, you know, how you approach a painting, how you approach a fish,
right?
How you conduct yourself as a professional, how you conduct yourself as an angler, the responsibility of social media as an artist, what you're putting out there, what you're saying to people,
right?
How you're representing yourself in your studio,
right?
And what you're putting out there and how you're representing yourself and, you know, your local, you know, fishery.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of parallels that I see. The art of fishing, right. The actual execution of it, the actual execution of a painting.
Right.
So many parallels to it. I mean, do you find yourself when you're out on the water, you know, just really thinking about anything like that, or just like correlating your work with actual fishing?
Well, I mean, I mainly sight fish. So in sight fishing, you're looking. You don't make a cast until you spot the fish and you set up the boat. So whether I'm poling or I'm on the front of the boat fishing or if I'm pushing, I'm always just paying attention to the habitats, you know, because there's the same kind of grass in 2 feet of water as there is in 6 feet of water. But when we're fishing on these flats, like as you get close to a channel edge and you have direct sheet flow of water, you have certain vegetation, you know, and then as you back away from it, you got other vegetation. So you learn that these fish have like a comfort zone. Like every time they come on these flats, they kind of come in the same way and they kind of leave the same way and they kind of hang in the same area. So I try to see what's there so that when I paint that later on down the line, if somebody says, oh, I just went to the Keys and caught a permit on, you know, out by the contents. Well, I fished out there so much that I know out by the contents, you know, you got all that white sand up high and then on the edges, it's kind of like that rocky hard bottom and you got certain gorgonians and certain sponges and stuff. And I'm always looking. That's all I'm doing. I had a professor in college tell me.
A lot of snook out there.
I had a professor tell me one time, like, I was only going to get to a certain level of painting ability, but I was always going to progress as a looker and a seer. That as I would look at stuff, as my eye aged and worked in, you know, in sequence with my hand, like, you know, translating the idea that I was always going to, your vision as to your subject, what you're looking at was always going to advance as, at first you see it as a snook. Now you start breaking it down into shapes where you got, you know, the eyeballs, this round thing, the gill plates, this triangle, and you got another one. And that's what's going to help you put it all together is like lining up those shapes like a puzzle.
Right.
So
and
when I'm
balancing the light and everything.
Right. So when I'm out there, I'm always looking and it's always about the work. Like it's gotten so far away from the fish. Like my buddy that I've been fishing with I've been fishing with Bobby for, it's going on 11 years now. And he knows, man, if I catch a fish, you know, once I get that fish in the leader, I'm like, here you go, bloosh, and I'm in the water with my camera and I'm taking pictures and it's all in the end, it's all about the work. Cause I mean, I've been fishing my whole life, man. I love it. I still love the fish no matter what it is. If it's the simplest form where I'm going to go with a little worm with my kids to the Everglades and catch a bass, or if I'm doing like the high technical, you know, tarpon, bonefish, permit stuff. But I also love to like work on these paintings and then walk away and be able to somewhat recreate what I saw when I jumped in the water without having it there to look at it, you know, based just off an interpretation of what I saw. It's just like, that's my challenge. Like that's my mission in these paintings, you know? And like I said, in the end, it's basically like a window or portal to any person that fishes, they can relate when they see that, you know, like, oh, I've been there. I've seen that. I've caught a permit. I've seen a permit on a ray, or I've seen the bonefish mudding with a big cloud of mud and they come out and they got like sand all over their back. You know, I've seen that. And those are the details that people that know my work and follow my work know that I fish. You know, because I put in all these little details that as a fisherman, these are the details that catch you the fish. You know what I mean? And So I always try. I always tie it in together. And like I always say, man, I'm not always down to paint, but I'm always down to fish. You know what I mean?
That's the truth. I do know.
Because when you're painting, it's a mood thing.
Dude, it's work. People are like, "Oh, you're following your passion. You're doing what you love." And it's like, yeah, man, but it's work.
It's work. Yeah.
You know,
once you have to do it, it's.
I
work.
mean, it's like it's really cool that we get to do this for a living.
Right.
I would not choose any different life. I mean, if you put a winning lottery ticket in front of me right now, I'd still paint fish.
Right, of course.
That's the freaking truth, right? Because I love it. You love it, right? We both do the same thing. But it's work, you know. Right. So don't think like, oh yeah, you're doing me any favors by giving me a job, right? Because that's a job. It's work, you know. Right? Because if I'm not painting, I'd rather be fishing.
Like I told my wife, like I was like, okay, you know how hard it is for you to go to your 9 to 5 and then come home and be a mom. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when I'm painting during the day, so I got to set up in the morning. Once I take the kids to school, I start painting. Mm-hmm. By 2:00, I know I got to wrap up. And only us as artists could really relate to this thing. Like, if you're going in a painting, at least for me, when I'm working on a painting, once I get going, once I'm on my horse and I'm galloping,
you don't want to stop.
You got that rhythm in your head. It's like impossible. And that's how you're there for 2, 3, 4 hours without taking a sip of water, without using the bathroom, without even looking away. It's like your palette, you're painting, your palette, your brush, you're painting. At 2:30, I got to stop, bro.
Yeah, it's tough.
Because I got a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they're not self-sufficient for a second. You know, it's Bobby, you know, constant. And then at night, I got to find in my head to get on that same wavelength to continue that piece at the level that I was doing it. And sometimes that's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
It's really hard. It's super hard. You know when that was really hard for me was during the 365 project.
Right.
Because I'm still running the studio. Right. That was not really a gig. That was just like a challenge.
Right.
And a lot of times I did those just before the stroke of midnight and then posted it up and done. You know, some of them were horrible. I just did it just to do it, you know, because it was like, oh, done, you know.
Yeah, but that's a major output.
Major output. And now with the U.S. Mint stuff, I mean, that's in addition to the studio because I can't do that here because we have a partnership now here at the studio and it's like that's all in addition to. So I got to do all that at home. Right. And so now I'm like bringing stuff at home with the mint stuff, and that's another thing. It's like when you get home. First of all, what you're saying about having to stop, well, it's like I got to be at home too. I mean, I get to work a little bit longer here, but it's still there's certain times, there's certain things you got to do. Or like if you're on a roll on something, and you're just like, you know, like 20 minutes is coming up. 15 minutes, and you just start counting the minutes. You know, exactly. And you're just like, finally, you're just like, bloop. Acceptance comes in, and you just like throw it in there, and then you just like walk away like that, like,
and you got to go.
Yeah, you got to go. You know, because you really do get in the zone. I mean, you get locked in,
and then the only thing
it's tough to walk away from that.
The only thing that helps me is I got to put that piece that I'm working on, and I got to put it in a place in my house that no matter what I'm doing, I can look at it.
Yeah.
So if
I'll stare at these things for like 2 hours.
Right.
After.
If I'm watching cartoons with the kids, or I'm helping him with his Legos, or helping my daughter with homework, I'm looking.
Yep.
Because that's gonna help me, like my attack plan.
That's when you start taking notes.
Right, and that's all right
for tomorrow.
This area needs. So tomorrow when I start, I got to concentrate on this and work towards the middle, or whatever the game plan.
Like, man, that one part was really giving me like a tough time. You know, you're just like. And then you just stare at it for a while, and then you could figure it out sometimes in your head. And then the next morning, you just hit it, and you're like, "All right, we're good." Yeah, you know. And so in a way, walking away from it,
it's a tough balance.
It's a good thing. You know,
it's it's a tough thing sometimes. You know, it's hard to leave sometimes.
And being a dad,
that's the hardest thing.
I mean, it's
being a dad isn't hard. Being a good dad is hard.
I always say that being a parent is the most challenging and most rewarding thing.
It is
they've ever done.
I wouldn't take my kids. I mean, my kids are the most amazing thing that could ever happen to me, man. Like, I always make this post, like, my bank account tells me different, but I'm rich, man. I got 2 beautiful,
flipping loaded,
healthy kids. Like, my daughter is amazing. She has, like, a lot of traits. Like, my mom's like a caregiver. My mom wants to make sure that everybody in the room is okay before herself. And my little daughter at 7 years old is the same way. And sometimes she's, like, hurt because people don't accept her help. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And we live in Miami, man. It's cutthroat. It's hustle and bustle. It's, you know, when there's that many people living in a small place, the whole me first thing sticks out.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Especially on the highway.
Exactly. So, like, I have this discussion with my wife. Is like, you want to raise your kids to be courteous, to be respectful, to have morals, to have principles, because that should be the first thing that pops into their head when an outside situation is presented. But at the same time, a lot of those things that you're doing within the household, that they practice in the household with relatives, with their close circle, you send them out into society and it sets them up for failure in a lot of places. And it's hard to tell them that, no, you're not wrong for doing that.
Right.
That person handled that wrong and made you feel bad, but it's not your fault.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you were doing exactly what we told you to do and how to be, and it just wasn't received in that way because that person wasn't taught that. But you can't take that as your personal blame. You just got to put your chin up and keep going because, like, my daughter's sensitive, man, so I work with her a lot. Like, I have these discussions with her, you know, like, just about that. You know, like, you can never second guess yourself because of the way somebody responded to you being proper. You know what I mean?
Yeah, don't ditch your principles just because the other one doesn't have any.
And no matter how tough it gets, you know, within, you know, the city or whatever setting you're in, like, you can't lose sight of that because that's what makes you who you are. You know what I mean? And
I do, yeah.
That's the hard part because now she's getting at an age where she's aware of a lot more things, you know, and
well, we have kids about the same age. How old's your daughter now?
My daughter's 7.
Yeah, my daughter's 8 and my son is 6.
Right.
How old's Miles?
Miles is 3.
Yeah, 3 now. Yeah. That's a funny. Boy, I tell you, when people say terrible twos, they got nothing on those horrible threes.
Bro.
Oh, 3 is the worst.
That boy's he's a Tasmanian devil, man.
Yeah.
Just no slow gear.
That's when they start realizing they got arms and legs and they can, yeah.
But I got him in baseball where he can funnel that energy. You know, he goes out on the field and you think he'd come home tired, but he comes back from the games even more charged
all
up.
Jacked up. I mean, you want to give your kids a foundation. I mean, you know, for sure. But this is a tough time to be raising kids. I mean, with the world. I mean, she's asking you for your phone all the time now, wanting to play games and doing things. Or
man, you know, I'm trying to be old school. Like, I want them in the yard. I want them playing.
Yep.
Because, man, I like, for example, they had this thing at school. It was called the Trichathon, where they bring their own bike. And, man, it's kind of sad that you're watching this generation that's, like, the kids' upbringing is being stained by technology, where riding a bike, like, who didn't ride a bike growing up? Yeah. Like, I don't think I had skin on my knees from the age of like 4 to like 12. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I was always on my bike, jumping over stuff, riding it in the ditch.
Street lights came on, you had to come home.
Exactly. Yeah. And man, I go to this trichathon with my kids and the kids don't even know how to ride bikes with training wheels. Why? Because I know people have 9-to-5s. I know the cost of living is through the roof. People have to apply themselves to make money, and that takes up a lot. That stresses you out. It's hard to leave that behind and not bring it home. It's impossible sometimes because it's just a necessity. But it's a lot easier to hand the kid a tablet or an iPad and send them on the couch than it is to say, all right, man, you know what? Let's go outside and go ride a bike and be in 100 degree
Especially when you're tired at the end of the day.
When you're tired at the end of the day. But, you know, with the balance, me and my wife always kind of make time for that. Like, we always do that because – yeah, she's a kid, man. She wants to look at Disney online, and she wants to, you know, she's all about The Descendants, which is a new Disney cartoon. And
Mal, does she love Mal?
Yeah, Queen of Mean. You know, that's it, dude. That's who she's gonna be for Halloween.
Oh my God! Yes, my daughter too. She just said they went to Target this weekend. Dad, they have Mal there. I'm like, Mal there. I'm like, did you buy it? They're like, no. I'm like, well, you should get it before they all get taken up.
Right.
You know, the Descendants.
Yeah.
Oh my God, don't get me started. So she'll grab my phone and she'll just grab my phone without even me seeing it, and then she'll just put Spotify over the Bluetooth in the truck, and all of a sudden it's like Good to Be Bad comes on.
Yeah, it's Good to Be Bad. Oh, right. And man, I working from home, I don't miss a beat. I've never missed a dance recital, a little league.
Yeah, that's good.
A daddy-daughter breakfast, nothing. And I feel like I got to do like, I don't know, man, my job is parenting in the city that I live in. Unfortunate. I have to do like double the duty, man, because I see it all the time. I see it all the time with the interaction and other kids and behavior patterns. And it's all from the abandonment of that parental figure being in their life, because it's easier to give them an electronic device and have them tied up for 4 hours. I mean, you go to restaurants and you got a family of 5 and the mom and dad are barely talking. They're on their phone, and every kid is face down at the table.
Yeah, we got no phones at the table for us. That's a rule.
It's like, and it's just simple things, man. Like the other day at the baseball game, every kid was complaining about being hot and the grass is wet. And it's
Suck it up, Buttercup.
It's like, come on, dude. Really? It's baseball, bro. Like, get out there, man. Sweat it up.
Yep. See, you saw in the corner of the studio, so my wife had her own corner in her paintings and stuff like that, but you don't see her here.
Right.
Because we made that decision a long time ago, or at least when, with the raising the kids, that we're going to have a stay-at-home parent.
Right.
Because, and in a lot of ways, that's biting the bullet.
Right.
Like I said, we're going to make that sacrifice because she could go out and she can get a job, or she could be here in this studio full time and bringing in another income or something like that. We could put them in daycare, and who knows what's happening there.
Right.
But we didn't want to live that life, and I think that's really cool too. Because a lot of ways, you're biting the bullet too by ending your day at 2:30, and that's sacrifice too. And somewhere something's got to give, and I think going back to that mindset as almost as a nation,
right?
It should happen. Right. There should be a movement for that, like more people staying home. I mean, we don't trust the school system and what they're doing and how things have developed, especially here in Florida. Right. I mean, come on. Right. So we're homeschooling.
Right.
And my wife is hell-bent on this. This is really her idea, her notion. And I was like, well, I was in full support of it. And the more she educated me on it, the more I started becoming a believer.
Right.
And now I'm seeing improvement in my kids, from an educational standpoint, from a happiness standpoint. Right. In a way, to me, all right. First of all, it's all built around this testing, right? Which is like, come on. Right. And then it's just like glorified babysitting, because how much is your kid actually getting paid attention to during the course of the day? Not more than my wife is paying attention to them from an educational standpoint. Exactly. Because, and she's teaching a curriculum. She's registered with the state and everything like that. And there's homeschool groups that she's involved with. Right. But we just, for us, found that to be a more valuable lifestyle, for the betterment of our children, for the betterment of our family unit. Right. And I don't know. I think more families need to start rethinking their process.
That in the early developmental stages, if you can control the outside influences more, then you can prep them better based on what your standards are, basically. Yeah.
You can call it shelter, but it's not really. It's more guidance. I mean, it's more guidance and development, because I think the key word is development.
And this is kind of a weird thing, but I'm a people person. I like analyze people and behavior and stuff. I just, so my daughter goes to school in what I call transition zone. So like her school is, from her school east, it's all super wealthy people. Mm-hmm. From her school west, it's just regular hardworking families where both parents work. Everybody's, just getting by. And
this is down in Kendall?
Well, she goes to school east by University of Miami, because that's where my wife works at. Right. We used to live closer to UM, and now we moved further west. But since she's still at the university, she gets to take her to school. Okay. And she's becoming aware of the difference between earning something and paying for something. Mm-hmm. She just got moved into the gifted program, where she did it through the system because of her grades. They tested her. But there's a lot of people that pay for an outside source to test their kid. And, the more you pay, the better the grade is. And they end up in gifted. So I'm kind of telling her about like materialistic things, because kids are kids, bro. They got no filter, Oh, I had a birthday party, but I didn't invite you. I forgot. Mm-hmm. That's kind of crappy. You know what I mean? Right. But she's becoming aware of those things, and I'm constantly. I grew up with nothing. I mean, not with nothing. I mean, my parents worked, but I didn't grow up wealthy.
Humble upbringing,
right? Like
you and I grew up the same. Right. Yeah, I didn't grow up from money by any stretch of the means.
So I think we do a great job as far as sacrificing. Like I always tell people, like me and my wife kind of live like minimal, and our kids live like they're rich. Like they've been to Disney 14 times. Dude, they got all.
Don't get me started.
They got all the latest and greatest. They don't miss a beach vacations and stuff. Yeah. But I lived, bro. You know what I mean? I got to do a lot of things, and I want what obviously better for them. And my wife had a super humble upbringing. She grew up in a huge family. A lot of brothers. She had 4 or 5 brothers, and I think that balance always keeps your feet on the ground, you know, as far as like your personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes home with topics and stuff that are, you know, just kind of petty, but it's all like based on, oh, why does she have this? Or why is she going to Europe? Or why? And I'm like, you got to understand.
Hey, but you know what? She's not catching permit with her daddy on the flats.
Exactly.
Right? That is priceless. Come on.
Yeah. And it's a lesson, man, because if parenting, like you can never say I did it. Like you can never say I did it. Like it's always because your kids model you. So when you see something in your kids that kind of you don't really like or kind of like, they probably got it from you.
Right.
So you got to work on yourself so that they don't see that in you, and that's how they're going to change their way. You can't tell them to do it and you still act that way because they're seeing it every day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I pay attention a lot to that, man. Like at this point in my life, everything else is everything else, and then there's my kids. You know what I mean? I do. Fortunate that I was given 2 healthy kids, you know, and I got to make the best of it, no matter what.
Family's everything.
That's
you got to count your blessings in this lifetime. I mean, you know, God gives you gifts, and you got to really what you do with them.
And the sacrifice. I'm bilingual, man. I know I can go out and get a job and make X amount of dollars, but I'm gonna be gone from 6 a.m.
Dude, I quit that lifestyle. I had a corporate job for 17 years as credit director for $1 billion company.
Right.
And I was like, I can't do this anymore,
right.
man. Yeah.
Because then you're a 2-hour dad or an hour and a half dad. Right. You get home and you're with your kids for dinner and bam, they're off in
like
bed.
You said, like I'm 5 minutes from my house. You know what I mean? I don't miss anything.
Right.
If I need to be there for something or the kid gets a cut or something and Liz needs my help, I'm there.
And I rather sacrifice it financially and know for a fact that later on in life when they ask, oh, who is your dad? They're going to have all these things to say versus, oh, I don't know. I only saw him for 2 hours a day.
That's life.
But we had this giant house, you know? But so what? I only saw my dad 2 hours. And I'm not knocking it. There's people that choose that. There's people that have no choice but to do that. But I just think I was given the opportunity to exploit my talent, and I make X amount of dollars every year. It fluctuates, just like, you know, some years we have good years. Some years we're on a roll. Some years based on mental ongoings in our life, you know, we put up our own fences and it affects our output. And
that's one aspect of being a professional artist that people do not see.
Right.
And we don't want them to see it most of the time because, you know, you want to maintain your consistency and everything like that. But this is not an easy life. Because
it's a feeling based thing. It's like a mood thing. And
people
life,
think we're all back, this is beautiful. And I'm going to go catch fish and I'm going to paint all day. And everyone's going to give me a shit ton of money for being beautiful. And it's dude, it ain't nothing like that, brother.
Like that, brother.
Yeah, that is nothing could be further from the truth. It's a struggle. It is an uphill battle every day.
Yep. And even when you're there,
you gotta work hard. I've never worked so hard in my life. You know what I mean? Just to running the own business and being your own artist and just trying to make your way like by the skin of your own teeth.
Right.
I mean, that's not an easy lifestyle.
It's not, man. And like, you know, like I have my buddy who has like a dream setup, you know, like my friend Derek DeYoung, he's a professional artist and his wife basically handles like the business aspect. And man, I mean, that's a giant workload off of your back as an artist because I'm everything. I'm the shipping department. I'm QC. I'm everything. You know, and
that's why we brought a partner into this because I needed to stop being all that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then, you know, by the grace of God, we that was able to happen for us. But you know, it's a good point. We're able to now do things before that. Just, you know, but that doesn't come without its give.
Right.
You know, so.
And I mean, I wouldn't take back what I do, man. I love the fact that I create something and, you know, selling art, you sell to successful people. You know, everyday people that are, you know, struggling for money aren't going to tie up $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 in something that's just going to hang on the wall. It's just not realistic, you know? So you deal with powerful people, wealthy people, you know, corporate company owners, you know, people that have more money than you could ever imagine. Yet I could buckle them with a 16 by 20 that I put it in their hand and I could see that guy just like, you know, or whatever.
It's a great feeling.
And that's, we need money to live, obviously. But that, for example, like the best example is I have some clients that are super conservative, kind of prudy, very monotone, no expression. And then I send them a text, oh, look, this is a progress pic. This is where I'm at. And you get this response that's like, oh, you know, like, that's awesome, that's right, you know, and you bring this human out of them because you were talking to a robot the whole time because that's how they got to live their life. They're in charge of a lot of stuff and they're systematic people, you know, they do the same thing every day because they got a lot of people depending on them based on how powerful they are.
Right.
And then it just kind of carries.
That is probably the best part of the job.
Right.
Is bringing that to someone's day.
Right.
You know, and you're the reason for that.
Right.
That is probably the best part of the job.
It is.
You know
And,
what I mean?
and I thrive on that. Like, I love that. I love when that person like puts down that wall and they're like, oh man, that's awesome. You know, and they go nuts, you know, and you get like an emotional exchange out of them versus like, oh, that's great.
The connection.
Right.
You know, and I mean, that's what this is all about.
Right.
You know, it's just that connection and that just celebration of, if you can't stop and celebrate your lifestyle or your little world that you built with the people you built it with,
right,
then what's it worth?
Nothing. Yeah.
Jack shit.
Right.
You mean?
Right.
That's what Connected by Water is. That's part of the reason why I wanted to start it. Because when it first started out, I was talking to people all day long, right?
Right.
And then I was like, well, why don't I just bring them into the studio and put it up on the internet and just this is I have these conversations with people all the time and it's great and I love it and I love talking to people.
Right.
I'm a very gregarious person. But the community and the celebration of it, I mean, that's living.
Right.
To me. You know, like you want to like talk about your family, your friends, your life, and then just get it all out there and just, you know, put it up and connect with other people. And I mean, that's one of the greatest things I love about living in South Florida and being around so many fishermen and so many anglers and so many just people that love like the salt water and the beach and just the whole lifestyle. I mean, we're all got that like-minded thing about us, and it's a beautiful thing if you look at it the right way.
Right, it's
because so many people could be like, about, you know, or just like jealous of other people's success, or, you know, whether they want to criticize or just like making fun of people or like be cliquey about it. Right. It's like, you know what? That's freaking baggage. Get rid of it. Right. Get lost. Celebrate your community.
I was guilty of all of that, man. I mean, I was young. You know, when I started this, I was young. I got a lot of attention at a young age for it, and I was cocky. You know, I was arrogant. And, man, my kids basically changed. Like, it was like somebody took my brain
change everything
and just flopped it to where now, like you say, I look back at that and it's just like, ugh. Yeah. You know, that was just not necessary. You know, not necessary at all. And like the whole thing of like I was touching on, like when the client sees the painting, that's kind of what I get out of talking to other artists. That I talked about some of these struggles with my wife, my friends, and they're like, get over it, bro. You're fishing a couple days a week, you're painting, you know, but
yeah.
Then you talk to another artist and they're like, oh, I know exactly what you mean. Like walking away from a piece, like starting something and having to walk away, or like the trials and tribulation of life as an artist, you know, the ups and downs. And like, we all have the same ups and downs. It's just at different levels. Some of us have higher ups, some of us have lower downs, but we're all kind of, you know, swinging on that same spectrum. And that's why I enjoy talking to other artists, whether it's like a super established old timer or, you know, somebody that just figured out something that was kind of like the niche and blew up real big, even though it was a big puff of smoke and then it dissipated, you know, but they still had that experience of being successful for an amount of time. You can't take that away from anybody, no matter what.
Sure.
Attention's attention, no matter what. So I just, that's why I like talking with these artists once that whole competitive hard edge is over.
I mentioned this before on one of the other shows. I can't remember which one it was, but I think a mistake that a lot of people make, a lot of creatives make, and I can just lump like whatever, artists, actors, comedians, musicians, whatever you want, right? Anyone that has a creative spirit about it, and just like, because, you know, I always end this show the same way, and you'll see how I end it, or at least I started to end it talking about ego, right? I think it's those artists and creatives or whatever, musicians, whatever, that shun their circle, and they go be like, I don't need that circle. You know, I don't need those people that may have gotten me here,
right? Or
B, that friend community, that friend circle that I've built, or that colleague circle or associate circle that I built. If you try to branch off from that, I think that's a big mistake that people make in their careers.
Right.
I think it's actually a detrimental mistake that you can't come back from.
Right.
Because number one, I mean, people see that. People see more than you think they do. And also you're putting a bad energy about yourself, and there's strength in numbers, and there's more love in a community, you know, And what did we say? I think it was on one of the previous podcasts recently. I heard like a couple of weeks ago, traveling by myself, I might get there faster, but traveling together, we'll get there longer.
Right.
We'll be able to
Get
walk
further.
get further.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I really, really believe that. And that was another reason why I wanted to have you on the show too, is just kind of like get that whole attitude like out in the open.
Right.
Because I think more artists need to see that.
Right.
That we can get along. It's cool. You know what I mean? And there's nothing that
we got a ton to talk about.
Yeah, it is not gonna affect your bottom line one iota. If anything, it might help it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's just the way I kind of see it.
I mean, art right now, fish art is at such a big platform, but it doesn't really get like I don't know, like attention. Like there's never a show for us. There's like very little.
We should do a show.
Right. There's very little like platforms for us to all display our work together. Like I remember when I first started, I did this thing at the IGFA. It was called Tournament of the Arts, and they invited artists from all over the place. There was like at the IGFA building there. They set up booths in that main room. Every artist got a 10x10. You could bring a giant original and a bunch of print, whatever, however you wanted. Man, and Don Ray was there, Kerry Chen, Tim Borski, everybody that was at that moment was working, full on, fish artists. Man, and it was cool to just walk around and talk to these people and see their work and see how they got there, because it doesn't tell you how you're going to get there, but it just tells you that there's different ways. There's different paths you can take to get to achieve your goal. Right. And I think that was a very good show, and they never did it again. And I mean, there was a bunch of people.
There was the Bonefish Tarpon Trust one.
That symposium.
That you and I were there. I actually don't even think that I met you that night. Right. But there were so many artists that like Ed was there.
Right.
I was hanging out with Adrian, but Adrian wasn't set up or anything like that. But
and I can't.
I didn't go. I was guilty for not going around to. I wanted to go around and meet every artist there, but then people come by your booth and you're there, and then before you know it, everyone's breaking down and leaving and stuff like that. So,
like Adrian's another one that I always kick in the ass. Like, dude, why don't you paint more?
Yeah, I talk to him about that all the time. But I think the thing is like, as you know, and painting takes a lot of time,
right?
And he's got his job. He likes to fish a lot,
right?
But the photography is really, I think, the path that he chose to go down more. He's incredible at it.
Right.
He's probably one of the best photographers I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yep.
If not the best as far as marine goes.
Yeah, his
and he'll probably like roll his eyes and shake his head when I say that, because he's like the most humble human being you could ever meet in your entire life. But he's amazing.
Yeah.
But I think that's really where he wants to put his focus. I mean, that really, I've talked to him about it, and it's his passion. He's like, yeah, whenever I bring a painting, you know what I mean? He likes it and he's really good at it, but I just don't think he doesn't love it like
he loves
his photography, so, I mean, you got to really, and he occupies his time with so many other things too. So the painting just takes time.
Yeah.
So he'll do a painting every now and then.
That's what he tells me. Yeah.
Yeah. But
I paint every now and then.
Yeah. So, and it's similar to the way we run our studio here too. It's like, I'm not sitting back and painting every day. And you talk about the different paths of what you can do in this business. I mean, there's not just one thing that you can do. You don't have to sit back and just paint and everything. Like our focus is a huge focus is apparel,
right?
And apparel design and the production and stuff like that. I mean, that's really where we put most of our energy. I'll sit back and I'll do a few paintings a year or whatever like that. I'd like to paint more.
Right.
I'd love to sit back and do a whole series next year. I think maybe I can. You know what I mean? I got to work that out. I got to carve out that time because I got a bottom line here now. And it's just a different
there's
path,
different avenues.
You know what I mean? It's just that's what we chose to do. Works for my lifestyle, works for what we're trying to accomplish. And I don't think any one artist can necessarily say, okay, this is the formula.
Right.
This is what you need to do. Right. If you don't do this successfully and then not a lot, if your phone's not ringing nonstop, then it's not going to work. That's a bunch of bullshit.
Right. No, of course.
Everyone's got their own thing. We're all individual artists.
Yep.
Even though we're all, if we're all painting fish, we're all painting fish. We're all drawing fish. We're all drawing fish. That's cool. But we all have our own opportunities. And that's when I said there's enough to go around. Right. I mean, the fishing industry is a huge industry. Florida's a beautiful, big place.
Yep.
And, we all just want to flourish together. That's why I think it's baggage that people can't just sit back. Maybe we should have cracked the beer for this one, and just hang out. But, I'd love to go fishing with you.
We got to do it, man.
Yeah.
We got to do it.
And get lost down there.
Nah.
No, I want to get lost. I want to get lost. I want my phone to not work anymore.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. I have a good friend, Brian Helms. He's now like one of the big, captains in Alamorada. He's done really good for himself. When he first started off, me and him used to fun fish a lot. And it was when Hurricane Charlie had taken the turn up the West Coast.
I remember that.
So we had this great idea. Let's go to Flamingo. So we go to Flamingo and we go out into Whitewater and we see 3 trailers at the ramp. So on the way out, we passed 2 boats. Halfway out, we passed the 3rd boat. So now we're the furthest boat out. So we get out all the way across to the West Coast. We turn the corner and we got the spot that we're going to. And we're just dead set on going here. Well, on the way there, we're running the shoreline and we look in towards the shoreline. You can't run the shoreline.
You guys aren't as far as Marco, are you?
No. We're like over by like Shark River.
Shark River,
right.
yeah, okay.
So we're running on the outside and we look in and there's like this little like 300-yard stretch of shoreline that every single bird in the Everglades is fighting for space near the water's edge. They're like crawling on top of each other. Birds are gawking. So I looked at Brian. I was like, you think we should circle back and fish that? And he's like, yeah, there's got to be something going on. So we circle back, but instead of starting at the beginning, we started like halfway down the shoreline. So we pulled through there and like every fallen log had like a snook or a redfish on it. We're just jacking fish. And we pull past the last of it where we're out of that whole little thing going on with these minnows. We're all pushed up there and he starts cranking on the motor and it's not starting. And he looks at me, he goes, hey man, I think we're, you know what? And I was like, I looked at Brian because Brian's like non-expressive. Like he could tell you that he won the lottery or that his dog died with the same face.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I think we're done. And I was like, all right. What do we do now? And he's like, I have no idea.
You have a sat phone on you?
Nothing. So,
that's a long way away.
So we pulled over to this beach. We take the cowling off, and we're just trying to do everything, and hours are going by. Mind you, there's no park rangers because that hurricane's going up the West Coast, so there's nobody around. Needless to say, man, we stayed at Graveyard Creek, which is on the north end of like Ponce de Leon Bay. We pulled over there. There's a porta potty and a picnic table. And that's been the most miserable night of my life.
You got eaten up by mosquitoes?
Dude, we got eaten alive. It poured for like 4 hours, and me and him are standing like shoulder to shoulder in the porta potty with the door open. It was like 120 degrees, but needless to say, man, we survived.
That sucks.
Yeah, we survived through the night, and then the next morning, I woke up, I couldn't sleep.
Sleep in the water.
Well, I slept in the boat, and the boat got swept in with the tide up under the mangrove, so the bugs went from holy shit to 100 times worse. And when I woke up, I was like under this canopy, just getting chewed alive, whatever. We started pulling our way back, and finally in the morning, we see a boat coming out of Shark, and we wave at the guy, and the guy didn't stop, so I took the flare gun, and I shot 2 flares out in front of him.
Right.
And the guy came towards us, and he's like, are you Brian and George? And he's like,
really?
Yeah, we're like, yeah. He's like, oh, there's a whole flotilla of boats looking for you, but I can't tow you in because I'm on a charter. And I was like, look, man, please.
On a charter? I'll pay for your charter.
I was like, listen, bro, please. I don't want you to stop your charter, but at least go back into Whitewater and let them know where we're at. So instead of them like spreading out and looking for us, they can just come right to us. Man, and when we saw those like 5-6 boats coming out of Shark River, like it was like the Armada coming looking for us.
Wow.
It was like the best feeling in the world, man.
I bet.
But that was a miserable night.
Dude, that night must have sucked.
Yeah, because camping and being prepped for it is one thing, but like an unexpected overnight stay in the Everglades while it's still warm out, there's nothing fun, dude. Like if they did an episode of Naked and Afraid in Flamingo, it'd be...
Making afraid and bitten and eaten.
It'd be dead and naked, you know? So... Oh, my God.
What do you got coming up?
Man, I got... I'm just working on, I got a body of prints that I want to come out with. I'm about to go public with my website that I basically took down because I was tired of looking at the old stuff. Huh? Yeah, so
we're in the middle of that too.
I took it down and I revamped everything. So I got, I want to do like a body of work for some print work, and I got some apparel. It's kind of not really like a clothing line. I kind of want to do it as wearable art based on the fishing season. Like I'm going to have a couple tarpon designs, and then, now we're kind of transitioning into like the Louisiana redfish craze. Like from now till like February, March, like everything you're going to see on social media, it's all pictures of people with giant redfish on their lap. So just kind of at the same time while I put all this stuff out for the masses, like for my audience, inside I'm still working out to a certain look as far as my work goes, you know, and I have a hard time with that because there's times that I'm crunched for time, so I work in acrylic, and then there's times where I want to paint in oil, but you know, with the oil, you need the time to dry and all that.
Time and ventilation. That's why I don't do oil here. I don't have any ventilation in here.
Right.
So I just do only acrylic in the studio.
Right. So I just got that. I mean, I just did the trophies for the fall fly bonefish tournament. I've been doing it it's going on like 10 or 12 years now. And then in Sugarloaf after Hurricane Irma, my buddy Doug Kilpatrick of the Lower Keys Guide Service, he started the Sugarloaf Showdown, which was a tournament to kind of help the guides out down there because it's a time of year that there's really not much going on, but he did this tournament to get them like some extra days booked and stuff, and it kind of became a big event. And I've done the trophies for them since, and I did their logo and their T-shirt design and whatnot, and I got some commissions lined up, you know, getting ready for the holidays and stuff like that. So
nice. We got to have an art show.
We should do a show, man.
Let's go like me, you, Derek, Pete, Adrian, a whole ton.
I've talked to Derek and Paul about it because
Amber involved.
Derek has the people from ICAST. He knows those people very well, like the people that put on the IFTD. So we were talking about at IFTD, the same way they have a room to showcase like the new products for 2020 or whatever the years.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be a bad idea, even like the conference room, like because if you go to ICAST, I'm sure you've been, like, you know,
I go to ICAST every year,
right? So every booth, you know, there's like the display of the product, and then there's a room where the deals are made and all that. I thought about it a way that we could break in to display our work is have like a big conference room where they have like little tables for people to do their business, and then just have our work on display where people could walk through it and look. And it was something that me and Derek and Paul were kind of working towards, and you know, life takes over and everybody just kind of got busy with their own stuff. And I haven't heard anything about it, but as far as like on a local level, man, in Florida, there's so much good art here right now. We got so many key players in the game living down here only because we live.
Let's talk about this more.
Yeah,
let's talk. Let's get that guy. I'd like to do something.
I think a pretty cool venue where we could all get together and display our work and make it kind of like I wouldn't say like a party, but you know, our work, a party. Our work's on display. Have some beer, like, you know, cutter food, whatever.
Strength in numbers, man.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good deal, bro.
Right on. So what's your at?
My
at J Martinez art, George Martinez art. What's your?
So my IG is jmartinez_art. You know, and then my website is jmartinezart.com. And I'm probably gonna go public with that here in the next couple weeks, as I'm just loading up all the mock-ups and I try to. That's
a pain in the ass too.
I should have had.
That's what I'm doing the same thing right now.
I should have had somebody do it, and I looked and I'm like, listen, man, with what I'm doing, I'm contributing all the image. There's no thought behind it. It's an image. You got to just place it based on composition on the page. So I started to do it myself, man, and I'm not a techie guy at all, bro.
Yeah,
you know,
it's tough.
So, but that's where I'm at, man. I'm just progressing little by little, you know, and being a dad, man. Being a dad and the family, man. We just bought our first home last year in December.
Congratulations.
So we got a house now with a yard. The kids got room to play. And it's just, you know, around the house projects on the weekends, you know, Little League with Miles. And, you know, my daughter's going to start her dance now. And
that's the thing I always tell people. People are always asking me to go fishing all the time. I'm like, I'll go during the week.
Yeah,
whenever
exactly.
you want. At the weekends, it's all about the kids.
Right. Because that's, you know, I mean, the way, like, my wife works. So on the weekends, it's the only time the kids have both parents.
Right.
So I hate going to Target. I hate going to Walmart. I hate doing all that. But I tag along just because we're a family unit, and you know, I'm in the shopping cart with the kids, and there's just more to life now than just being out there fishing gypsy, bro. I honestly, I've had my no shirt, barefoot days, you know, sleeping on a couch somewhere random just to go fish a fishery, and I still got my trip to Louisiana, which I usually go between October and December. I go out there. I have a good friend of mine from Florida, Nick Sasick, and he trailers his boat over there. We run a big camp on stilts on the marsh, and it's just, I call it Dude Fest, man. I bring, like, sometimes his guide partner is open on the same day, so he allows me to bring up to 4 people. So I'll get all my buddies. We jump on a plane, we fly over there.
Let me know if a spot opens up on that one, man.
Man, it's 4 days off the grid, and if we catch fish, we catch fish. If we don't, whatever. But it's just a great time down there, man.
Right on.
So
you know, I know Derek DeYoung comes down here a lot too.
Yeah, he comes to the Keys.
Next time he comes, man, I'd like to have him on the show. You want to come back on the show?
Absolutely, man.
I'd love to have you back on the show. And bring Derek on with you next time, and we'll all just shoot the shit.
That'll be awesome, man. I think we need more of that, man, because if people see that Because there's clients that feel like if they buy from you, it'd be a disservice to you to buy
I got clients that buy
from
from me and other artists. I mean,
You know,
I got no
so-
problem with that. As long as they keep buying with me.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think it's cool, man. I think we definitely need to try to push to do some kind of group show or
Yeah.
something along those lines.
For sure.
You're friends with Peter, right? Are
I'm
you?
good friends with Pete.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know he's up this way.
Yep.
I think we got a good showing if we did something.
we-
There'd
yeah.
be a lot to look at for
we
sure.
could put up a solid product, no doubt about it.
Yep.
George, I want to thank you for coming on today, brother.
Man, thank you for having me. And before I go, man, I just want to, the fly fishing community lost a great dude this week. My buddy Cordell lost his battle with cancer. Us as artists, man, we would appreciate this guy. He was like the most original dude in the world, man. Like there's a lot of people that fish, man, but this guy's ability to tell stories and his flies and his color spectrum, like he would tie these hot pink flies that I would even tell him to his face, like, dude, I wouldn't even have that in my box.
Yeah.
And he would go out there and make it work, man. And he was diagnosed with cancer last year and he fought a good fight, man. And we just lost him on Saturday. And it was just a big member of our local, Miami community. He basically turned on so many people that couldn't afford a boat into fishing out of a canoe in Biscayne Bay and catching permit and bonefish on fly out of a canoe. So now you have a whole generation of these kids that maybe can't afford the $60,000, $70,000 skiff, but they have a canoe. And thanks to Cordell, they're out there, participating. They're out there fishing. They're out there getting away from the mainland, just doing it. And, man, rest in peace, bro. He just passed away this Saturday.
Give it up to Cordell.
Yeah.
That was nice of you to say that.
So
that's
good
good
it,
stuff.
my brother. I appreciate you having me, man. I'm open to come back whenever.
Right on.
And wish you the best with everything, bro.
Likewise. And as we always say, it's how we end it now, right? Like my buddy Mike G says, your ego is not your amigo. Right?
That's it, bro.
Right? Do your best. Let God do the rest. And always remember to eat, drink, and be local. Jorge Martinez, Connected by Water. You out.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me.